United Nations Development Program.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellencies, distinguished participants. It's a delight to be with you and speak briefly about the support that UNDP has been working on to assist with the efforts in the Aral Sea region. I'm very sorry that I could not be with you, but unfortunately, the pandemic did not allow that. But hopefully, very soon, we will be able to again work together in person. I hope you can see my screen, Bakadir, but just to make sure.
Yes, yes, Pradeep, we see it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let me, of course, start by saying that this is a problem that we all recognize is incredibly important. It's causing a range of human, environmental, and socioeconomic challenges which have compounded over time and which need to be dealt with in an integrated manner so that there's an effective solution. And we're very much in working towards that together with our partners in Tashkent and Nukus. The overall approach here is really anchored in what Uzbekistan has already determined is necessary, and that is to reap the potential of the region as a zone of ecological innovation and technology. We are very much anchoring our approach on the 7 pillars of innovation that have been identified, with community empowerment and resilient livelihoods being at the center of it. And of course, a preliminary strategy and roadmap has been created and certainly is being developed further as we work through a way to ensure that we adopt a data-driven systems innovation approach to solving what really is a collection of integrated issues that need to be addressed in as one, given the systems linkages that exist. And I will elaborate a little bit on this in my presentation. Now, first, I want to say that when I was last in Tashkent late last year, we made a commitment to support our partners to ensure that the necessary finance can be mobilized to address many of these challenges that we've discussed, and we've heard a reference to that already. We had envisaged a process that would essentially see how the various efforts that have already been underway have worked and what they haven't done and where the challenges remain. We wanted to identify a system of transition pathways that will help the region, Krakatoa, Pakistan, to move towards a more sustained future. And of course, that involves developing and implementing a set of initiatives that will help the region move towards the kind of future that it envisages. And now in that context, there have been a number of activities that have been planned. These are very much underway. Of course, the pandemic has interrupted some of those or delayed the speed at which we would have hoped to have completed them. But by and large, I think thanks to your efforts and my colleagues in our country office in Tashkent, we have managed to stay pretty much close to the timeline that we envisaged at the beginning. There have been a number of engagements, even with the challenges of the pandemic, to ensure that the work moves forward. And right now we are essentially in the process of rolling out the capacity building efforts on systems approach, systems mapping. These are, I think you have been the participants in some of the events that we've organized. We've also started other things outside of Uzbekistan, which we hope we can then continue as the results of those efforts get underway. Now, the core of the approach that we are adopting here is to ensure that we have a data-driven approach, one that is based on insights drawn from data that can drive decisions as we move forward. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second is, and this is the departure from the previous efforts of assistance that has characterized the region. Instead of having a series of distinct projects, what we are trying to do is to try and come at this through a systems lens, a systems approach. And that is essentially to ensure that we cultivate the abilities, the capabilities to recognize the various relationships that exist between different initiatives, between different drivers, and make sure that we really nurture the linkages that exist. And then the third big element of our support is really anchored around unlocking finance, as it was mentioned before by the distinguished speaker. Without finance, we're not going to be able to address many of these priorities. But this is also much more than just funding. It is about unlocking finance, a sustained stream of finance that will be able to support the kinds of transitions that are needed over time. And these are the three main elements of what's driving the overall UNDP approach. Now, you have already identified a number of projects that you have sort of already determined to be a priority to implement as a response to many of the challenges that you've already identified in this region. Many of them focus on afforestation. As you can see with the green dots, I think there are about 6 ideas around afforestation. There are 3 on water resources management and so on and so forth. But one thing that is not obvious when you look at the projects in this sense, in this way, is the interconnectedness between these issues, because you cannot do climate resilient smallholder, livelihoods related projects and think of it as being distinct and separate from a set of projects that do afforestation. After all, even the afforestation projects create jobs and create livelihood opportunities. So those linkages must be recognized. And they're important to recognize in order to have the kind of impact that we want to see. So what we're trying to do here is to ensure that we are able to see how these projects fit together with the thematic areas that need to be addressed. This is just for illustrative purposes, but if you can imagine a set of projects, as you can see here with the pink dots, and you can also imagine a set of thematic areas that need to be addressed, such as agriculture or afforestation or livelihoods, we must make sure that we understand how these various distinct projects fit together, what kinds of issues they're going to be addressing and what they're not, see whether we can actually maximize on the impact of a certain set of projects. And this practice of understanding these kinds of linkages is not there. And that's something that we want to try and see whether that will actually improve the way in which sustainable development in this region can be advanced. It is a departure from the practices that have existed in the past, and we think this approach will be a better way of addressing many of the challenges in the region. And I think if we do this, we also have an opportunity to ensure that the links between different SDGs are also recognized and addressed. And in that, I think there will need to be a way of identifying which of the projects are going to help achieve a number of SDGs and which ones are going to achieve just one or two, distinct or specific areas of support. The recognition of that is important because one of the comments that was made earlier was also to ensure that there's no duplication, that we are effective in the kinds of interventions that we implement. Now, I think there are several key areas and interventions that we need to focus on. One is to not come at this from a perspective of just projects, but rather a portfolio of initiatives that are needed, recognizing the interconnectedness between the various different projects that sit within the portfolio. We need to make sure that, as it was mentioned before, that we're constantly learning from these portfolios of interventions, and that they feed back into our decision-making process. We need to make sure that we are building capabilities within the relevant institutions, and I'm delighted that we're doing this in partnership with the Ministry of Innovation and Development. It is important that there are strategic partnerships in order to attract and direct the kind of financing that's needed. So these are some of the key things that we want to try and address, and which we're working to embed into the approach that we plan to follow. Now, one of the important pieces of work that's already started is to ensure that there's a connection between, and this was also mentioned previously, decision making that is based on data analysis and projections, which essentially will support monitoring of change, and which in turn will help drive investment decision making, the kinds of feasibilities that are needed, and the kind of information that's needed to unlock the kind of scaled up financing that's required for a challenge like this. And in that context, we have already started working with the Columbia University and the NASA Goddard Institute to try and ensure that there is a proper risk assessment done for the region that can help inform the kinds of prioritization that needs to happen. That work has already started. We've been working very closely with some of you in preparing the scope of work. And as soon as the early results of that data-driven exercise begins to manifest, that will then become a point of conversation with you, and we will together work out the way in which we move things forward with the new data and insights that we have. And of course, in this process, we very much hope to also enhance capacities within the relevant institutions in Uzbekistan, so that this kind of work can be continued well into the future beyond this initial support that we are providing. So we very much want to ensure that this is embedded within the existing structures, be it in NUKUS or the Ministry of Innovation and Development, so that there's continuity to address the challenges at hand. Now, in terms of next steps, we want to finish, of course, the data modeling work with the Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources and Uzi Hydromet, and that's ongoing with Colombia. Once we have the preliminary data and portfolio mapping, then we will work with you to move towards the identification of various investment decisions. We hope to commence that work in early next year, if everything goes well. And then, of course, to work with you and other partners to ensure that we increase capabilities to build in systemic risk management approaches to deepen the connections between the portfolio in the Aral Sea region, and really get the work started, hopefully towards the end of next year, where implementation can begin. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to share with you in terms of where we are heading. And I very much look forward to continue the conversation with you and carry this work forward. Thank you very much.
Господин
Mr.
огромное
Sakharyan,
спасибо
thank you very
вам
much
за представленную
for
презентацию
the
и
presentation
визуализацию.
and visualization.
Это очень
This
полезно,
is
и я думаю,
very
что
useful. I
в
think
контексте
that
того, что
in context
сегодня
of what
господин
Mr.
замминистра
Deputy Minister
инновационного
of
развития
Minister
говорил,
of
это очень
Innovation spoke about,
созвучно
this is
тем,
really
что озвучено
corresponds
было
to what was
правительством.
voiced by the
Мы
government
очень
of
надеемся,
Uzbekistan.
что
We do
работая
hope
совместно
very
мы
much
можем
that
уже
working together
показать
we could
результаты
show
непосредственно
some
как бы
results.
на местах. Еще раз огромное спасибо.
Again, thank you very
Уважаемые
much, dear
участники конференции,
participants
мы
of the
переходим
conference.
сейчас на
We are
третью
switching to the
тему
third session
данной конференции.
of this
Это
conference.
связано
This is
непосредственно
related
по
to
приоритетным мерам по решению
priority
проблем в
measures.
регионе. И позвольте
And allow
передать
me
слово
the
госпоже
floor to
Урал
Ms.
Аминовне,
Ural
профессору,
Amidovna,
ректору
Professor,
медицинского
Rector of
института
Medical
Республики
Institute of
Каракалпакистан.
Republic of
Спасибо большое.
Pakistan. Thank you very much. Good morning, dear Chairman, dear participants of the conference.